Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon and watched the stars through the massive viewing window. His hands were steady on the control panel, but his heart felt heavy. Today was the day humanity would leave the Galaxy Coalition forever. Year was 2387, and for over 200 years, humans had been part of the Coalition. 47 different alien species worked together across 3 arms of the galaxy. They built cities, traded goods, and kept peace between worlds. But humans were tired of being treated like servants. Jake pressed a button on his communication panel. The face of Admiral Lisa Carter appeared on the screen. She was sitting in her office on Earth, looking as tired as Jake felt. "All ships ready?" "For departure, Admiral," Jake said. Lisa nodded slowly. 234 years, Jake. That's how long we've been fixing everyone else's problems. Jake knew she was right. Every time an alien world had trouble, they called humans. When machines broke down, humans fixed them. When different species couldn't agree, humans found solutions. When disasters happened, humans rushed to help. But did anyone ever thank them? Did anyone ever try to learn how humans solved these problems? The answer was always no. The Zephyrians still think we're just good mechanics, Lisa continued. The crystal people believe we're useful for heavy lifting. The gas clouds see us as translators. None of them understand what we really do. Through his window, Jake could see other human ships preparing to leave. The transport ship Liberty carried families from 12 different worlds. The cargo vessel Freedom held all the equipment and supplies humans had built over the decades. The military ship Independence protected them all. Jake's communication system buzzed. An incoming message from Coalition Central Command appeared on his screen. It was Vexhai, a tall purple creature with 4 arms and silver eyes. Vexhai spoke. For the Zephyrian Council, Captain Morrison, Vexhai said in his strange musical voice, "We have received notice of human departure. This seems unnecessary. Humans provide adequate mechanical services. Why leave?" Jake almost laughed. Adequate mechanical services. After 2 centuries of saving their civilization, that's what they called human contribution. "We're expanding into new territory," Jake replied, using the official reason they had agreed upon. Humans need room to grow. Vexhai's silver eyes blinked slowly. "Very well. We thank humans for mechanical assistance. Other species will fill your roles." The communication ended. Jake shook his head. They still didn't understand. Humans weren't just mechanics or translators or problem solvers. Humans were the glue holding the entire coalition together. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, Steve Parker was packing his last bag. He had worked there for 8 years, keeping the atmospheric processors running. The machines were old, built by a species that had gone extinct 300 years ago. The current inhabitants, the crystal people, tried to maintain them, but never quite succeeded. Steve had spent years modifying the processors, rerouting power, adding backup systems, and creating workarounds for problems the crystal people couldn't even see. He had written detailed reports explaining every change, but the crystal people found his explanations overly complex. "The systems will run fine without you," Chief Engineer Zarath had told him yesterday. Zarath was a crystal person who sparkled like a diamond in the light. "We have operated these machines for decades." Steve wanted to explain that they had only operated them successfully because of his constant adjustments. The processors should have failed 20 times over, but Steve's modifications kept them stable. However, Zarath never listened to his explanations before, so why would she listen now? On the Coalition capital world, Amy Rodriguez was finishing her last day as network administrator. The central computer system connected all 47 species across thousands of worlds. It handled everything from trade agreements to military, communications to scientific research. The system was a mess. Each species had added their own programming over the centuries, creating a tangle of incompatible code. Different species thought in different ways, and their programming reflected this. The gas clouds used mathematical concepts that the rock people couldn't understand. The insect hive wrote programs that made sense to group minds but confused. Individual thinkers. Amy had spent 15 years creating bridges between these different programming languages. She wrote translation programs, built compatibility layers, and created backup systems for when the main code failed. Her work looked simple on the surface, but underneath it was incredibly complex. The tentacled overseers who were taking over. Her job had looked at her code with confusion. Why so many unnecessary steps? They had asked. We can simplify this. Amy had tried to explain that each unnecessary step prevented a different type of system failure. But the overseers were confident they could make the system more efficient. Back on the New Horizon, Jake received confirmation from all human ships. Every human in Coalition space was aboard and ready to leave. 234 years of human presence in the galaxy was about to end. Admiral Lisa Carter's voice came through the communication system one final time. This message would be broadcast to every world in the Coalition. To our friends and colleagues in the Galaxy Coalition, Lisa began. For over 2 centuries, humans have been proud to work alongside you. We have shared knowledge, solved problems together, and built a better galaxy for all species. Jake listened to the words, but he knew the truth was different. Humans had done most of the work, while other species took the credit. Today, we begin a new chapter, Lisa continued. We leave you as we found you, free to determine your own destiny. We wish you success and prosperity in all your future endeavors. The message ended. Jake looked around his bridge one last time. In a few minutes, he would give the order to jump to hyperspace. The New Horizon would lead the human fleet to unexplored space. Far from the Coalition. Jake activated the ship's hyperspace drive. All around him, other human ships did the same. Their engines hummed with power as they prepared to jump across. The galaxy. All ships, this is New Horizon, Jake announced. Jump in 3, 2, 1. The stars outside his window stretched into lines of light. The New Horizon leaped forward through space and time, carrying Jake and his crew toward their new home. Behind them, the Galaxy Coalition continued its daily business. Alien species went to work, children went to school, and governments made plans for the future. Everything seemed normal. But in 6 hours, the first systems would begin to fail. The aliens would discover what humans had really been doing all those years. They would learn the difference between adequate mechanical services and keeping an entire civilization alive. The day humans left, everything started falling apart. 3 days after the human ships disappeared into hyperspace, the first alarm sounded on Kepler 442b. Zareth was sitting in her crystal chair when the red warning lights began flashing throughout the atmospheric processing center. She had never seen these particular lights before. They were part of the system that Steve Parker had installed, but he had never explained what they meant. The main screen showed numbers that were climbing higher and higher. Zareth tried to read the display, but the text was in human writing, mixed with symbols she didn't understand. She pressed buttons on the control panel, but nothing happened. Computer, explain warning status, she said aloud. Atmospheric pressure dropping in sectors 7 through 15, the computer replied in its flat mechanical voice. Oxygen levels falling below safe limits. Emergency protocols activated. Zareth felt her crystal body grow cold. 12 million people lived on this world. They all needed the atmospheric processors to breathe. Without these machines, everyone would die within hours. She called her engineering team. 5 other crystal people arrived within minutes, their diamond-like bodies reflecting the emergency lights around the room. What did Steve Parker do to these machines? Asked Nexval, the second engineer. Everything was simple before he came. But that wasn't true, and Zareth knew it. Before Steve arrived, the processors failed every few weeks. People died during those failures. Steve had somehow made the machines stable, but his modifications looked like chaos to Crystal People Minds. Zara single quotes pulled up Steve's technical reports on her computer. Pages and pages of human writing filled the screen. Charts, diagrams, and mathematical equations that made no sense to her. Steve had tried to explain these reports many times, but Zarath had always dismissed them as overly complicated human thinking. Now, as oxygen levels continued dropping across the planet, she realized that Steve's overly complicated thinking might have been the only thing keeping everyone alive. The processors were shutting down one by one. Each failure meant another section of the planet would soon be unable to breathe. Zareth and her team worked frantically, trying to restart the machines, but every attempt failed. Send a message to any human ship, Zareth ordered. Emergency priority. We need help immediately. But the human ships were already too far away to receive the message in time. Meanwhile, on the Coalition capital world, the Central Computer Network was having its own crisis. The tentacled overseers had spent the last 3 days improving Amy Rodriguez's code by removing what they called unnecessary complications. Commander Veltar was the lead overseer in charge of the network. His purple tentacles moved across multiple keyboards at once as he watched the system's performance. For 2 days, everything had seemed to work perfectly. The network was running faster and more efficiently than ever before. Then, at exactly 347 hours, everything crashed. Every communication link between star systems went dead. Trade networks stopped working. Military communications fell silent. Scientific databases became unreachable. The entire coalition was suddenly cut off from itself. Veltar's tentacles moved rapidly across his controls, trying to understand what had happened. The error messages were appearing faster than he could read them. Each failed system seemed to cause 3 more systems to fail. Restore Amy Rodriguez's original programming. He ordered his team, but when they tried to reinstall Amy's code, they discovered something terrifying. Amy's simple programs were actually incredibly complex systems that touched every part of the network. The overseers had removed so many pieces that they couldn't put the system back together. Amy's code wasn't just managing data flow between different species' computers. It was preventing conflicts between incompatible programming languages, protecting against cascade failures, and maintaining backup systems that other species didn't even know existed. Without Amy's programs running constantly in the background, the Coalition's entire digital infrastructure was collapsing. On the trading world of New Mumbai, cargo ships were crashing into each other in space. The automated navigation system that had worked perfectly for decades suddenly couldn't avoid collisions. Captain Ryan Bell had programmed the navigation computers 5 years earlier. His collision avoidance system seemed simple to the alien pilots who used it. The ships automatically steered around asteroids, avoided other vessels, and found safe paths through crowded space routes. But Ryan's programming was actually solving thousands of mathematical problems every second. It predicted the movement of every object in space, calculated the best routes for maximum efficiency, and adjusted for unexpected problems before they became dangerous. The alien pilots never saw this complex work happening. They only saw ships that moved smoothly through space without crashes. When Ryan tried to explain how the system worked, they told him it was too complicated to be necessary. Now, without Ryan's constant micro-adjustments and predictive algorithms, the navigation system was failing. Ships were flying into asteroid fields, colliding with space stations, and getting lost in empty space. The simple collision avoidance system was actually a masterpiece of human engineering that no other species understood. Food shipments stopped arriving at dozens of worlds. Medical supplies were floating dead in space. Emergency rescue ships couldn't navigate safely to help the people who needed them. Back on the coalition capital, emergency meetings were being held in every government building. But without the communication network, the different species couldn't coordinate their responses. Each group was trying to solve the crisis alone, not knowing what others were doing. The Zephyrian Council met in their silver tower, but they couldn't contact their colonies to check on their safety. The Gas Cloud Collective tried to send messages to their distant members, but the signals never arrived. The Rock people attempted to coordinate with their mining operations, but the network remained dead. Ambassador Chris Martinez was one of the few humans who had stayed behind on the capital world. He was supposed to document the transition period and help alien governments understand human systems. But now he was overwhelmed with emergency requests from every species in the coalition. "How do we fix the atmospheric processors?" asked a Crystal People representative. "Why are our ships crashing?" demanded a Rock People captain. "When will communications be restored?" pleaded a Gas Cloud diplomat. Chris tried to explain that these weren't simple problems with easy solutions. Every human system in the coalition was interconnected. Fixing one problem often required understanding 10 others. But the alien representatives wanted quick answers, not complex explanations. As the crisis entered its fourth day, 17 star systems were reporting critical failures. Millions of people were in danger. The carefully organized Galaxy Coalition was falling apart without the humans who had been quietly holding it together. And this was just the beginning. The worst problems were still coming. 2 months had passed since the humans left, and the Galaxy Coalition was dying. On the agricultural world of Green Valley, the crops were turning brown and withering in the fields. The Hive Mind Collective had taken over the farming operations. From Dr. Kelly Foster, confident that their mathematical precision could improve on human primitive methods, Queen Node Zixara stood in the middle of what used to be a thriving wheat field. Her insect body buzzed with frustration as she watched thousands of plants dying around her. The collective's farming computers had calculated the perfect amounts of water, fertilizer, and sunlight for maximum crop growth. Everything should have worked perfectly, but the plants were dying anyway. Run diagnostic on soil composition. Zixara commanded her worker drones. The results appeared on her data pad within minutes. The soil was too acidic, and nitrogen levels were wrong. Mineral content was imbalanced. None of this made sense according to their calculations. Dr. Kelly Foster had left detailed notes about her farming methods, but they seemed completely random. To the collective, Kelly would plant different crops in seemingly chaotic patterns. She would add strange combinations of fertilizers at odd times. She would let some fields rest while others worked overtime. The collective had ignored Kelly's notes and followed their own logical system instead. They planted single crops in perfect rows, used mathematically calculated amounts of fertilizer, and maximized every inch of growing space. Now, as food supplies ran low across dozens of worlds, Zixara realized that Kelly's chaotic methods had actually been balancing complex soil chemistry that the collective never understood. Kelly had been rotating crops to prevent soil depletion, mixing different plants to maintain proper mineral levels, and timing fertilizer applications to match seasonal changes that the collective's computers couldn't predict. Without Kelly's knowledge, the agricultural systems across the galaxy were collapsing. Worlds that had been well fed for decades were now facing starvation. In the military sector, the Coalition Defense Force was suffering its own disasters. Commander Tony Mitchell had been the chief tactical coordinator for the entire fleet, but alien officers had always considered his strategies too cautious and overly complex. General Thrakson of the Rock People was now leading the defense fleet. He was confident that Rock People military training was superior to human methods. When reports came in that the insect swarm was raiding 3 border systems, Thrakson immediately launched a counterattack. "We will use Formation Alpha 7, Thrakson announced to his fleet commanders. Standard textbook assault pattern, simple and effective. The Coalition fleet moved into perfect battle formation, exactly as they had learned in military academy. 200 ships arranged in precise geometric patterns, advancing toward the enemy with mathematical precision. The insect swarm destroyed them in less than an hour. Thrakson watched in horror as his ships exploded one after another. The swarm wasn't following any textbook tactics. They scattered randomly, attacked from unexpected angles, and used hit-and-run strategies that the Coalition formation couldn't handle. Tony Mitchell's battle plans had always included preparations for unconventional attacks. He would spread ships out to prevent concentrated damage, keep reserve forces ready for surprise threats, and maintain flexible formations that could adapt quickly to changing situations. Other commanders had called these preparations paranoid and wasteful. Now, as the Coalition fleet suffered its worst defeat in 2 centuries, Thrakson understood that Tony's paranoid preparations had been the only thing preventing military disasters. Without human tactical thinking, the Coalition's enemies were easily defeating forces that used to be unbeatable. The crisis deepened when transportation systems across the galaxy began breaking down. Cargo ships were getting lost in hyperspace, unable to navigate between star systems without human-programmed guidance computers. Captain Bill Harper had designed the hyperspace navigation system 20 years earlier. His navigation computers seemed simple to alien pilots. They entered their destination, pressed a button, and arrived safely at their target. The system worked so reliably that most pilots never thought about how it worked. But Bill's programming was actually solving incredibly complex mathematical problems during every jump. Hyperspace was full of dangerous energy currents, gravitational anomalies, and spatial distortions that could destroy ships or send them to the wrong part of the galaxy. Bill's computers calculated safe paths through this chaos, adjusted routes in real time, and provided backup navigation if the primary systems failed. When alien engineers tried to improve Bill's navigation system by simplifying the code, they removed safety features they didn't understand. Now ships were jumping into energy storms, getting caught in gravitational whirlpools, and emerging from hyperspace in completely wrong locations. Food shipments couldn't reach hungry worlds. Medical supplies were lost in space. Military reinforcements arrived weeks late or not at all. The galaxy's transportation network, which had connected 47 species for centuries, was falling apart. On the Coalition capital world, emergency sessions were being held every day. But without working communications, the different species couldn't coordinate their responses. Each group was fighting the crisis alone, often making problems worse for other species. Ambassador Chris Martinez tried to help, but he was just one person facing problems that had required thousands of humans to solve. Every day brought new disasters. Every hour revealed another human system that was more important than anyone had realized. "We need to contact the human colonies," declared Senator Vitar of the Gas Cloud Collective during one emergency meeting. "We must ask them to return." But when they tried to send messages to human space, they discovered that their long-range communication systems had also been maintained by humans. The transmitters were failing, the receivers were full of static, and the signal boosters weren't working properly. Even if they could send a message, they weren't sure where the humans had gone. The human fleet had jumped to unexplored space beyond the edge of Coalition territory. They could be anywhere in the galaxy. Meanwhile, reports were coming in from across Coalition space about more system failures. Power plants were overheating, without human maintenance schedules. Water treatment facilities were producing contaminated water without human quality control systems. Even simple things like elevator systems and door controls were starting to malfunction without regular human adjustments. The aliens were beginning to understand a terrible truth. Humans hadn't just been workers in the coalition. They had been the hidden foundation that everything else was built on. Every system, every process, every technology in coalition space had been improved, maintained, or completely redesigned by human ingenuity. Without humans, the Galaxy Coalition wasn't just having problems. It was slowly dying, one failed system at a time. And the worst part was that the crisis was accelerating. Each failure caused other failures, creating a cascade of disasters that no one knew how to stop. The day humans left, everything had started falling apart. Now, 2 months later, it was becoming clear that everything might actually collapse completely. 6 months after the humans left, the Galaxy Coalition faced its darkest hour. The crisis that would end everything began on 12 major worlds at exactly the same time. The central fusion reactors that powered entire planets started showing dangerous warning signs. Red alarms flashed in control rooms across the galaxy as reactor temperatures climbed beyond safe limits. On New Geneva, Chief Reactor Supervisor Matt Thompson had designed the safety systems before leaving with the human Exodus. The gaseous entities who took over his job had found his safety protocols unnecessarily complex and had simplified them for better efficiency. Now, Entity Prime Vazith floated anxiously around the reactor control room as warning lights flashed everywhere. The reactor core temperature was rising rapidly toward critical levels. If it reached meltdown, the explosion would destroy the entire solar system. Activate emergency cooling. Vazith commanded his technicians. Emergency cooling is not responding, came the reply. Safety systems are not functioning properly. Vazith tried to understand what was happening. Matt Thompson's safety protocols had seemed like excessive paranoia to the gaseous entities. Thompson had installed backup systems for the backup systems, with multiple redundant cooling methods and automatic shutdown procedures that, activated at the first sign of trouble, the entities had removed most of these systems, believing that one primary cooling system and one backup would be sufficient. They were wrong. The primary system had failed 3 days ago, and the single backup was now overwhelmed by the reactor's increasing heat. Matt's excessive safety measures had actually been preventing chain reactions that could destroy worlds. His multiple cooling systems weren't redundant. They were essential layers of protection against different types of reactor failures. As the reactor temperature continued climbing, Vazith realized that without Matt's complex safety network, they had no way to prevent a catastrophic meltdown. Similar scenes were playing out on 11 other worlds. Reactor after reactor was approaching critical failure, and alien technicians were helpless to stop them. The humans who had designed these safety systems were gone, and their detailed technical manuals had been dismissed as overly complicated. Human writing. On the Coalition capital world, a junior diplomat named Alex Hayes was working late in the archives when he made a discovery that changed everything. Alex had been trying to understand why the Coalition was falling apart so completely, and he had spent weeks reading through old human communication logs. What he found in those logs was terrifying. The record showed that for over 2 centuries, humans had been quietly preventing disasters that other species never even knew were approaching. Every human innovation, every safety system, every simple solution had been addressing fundamental problems in alien technology and thinking. When the Crystal People built their atmospheric processors, the design had critical flaws that would have killed millions. Steve Parker hadn't just maintained those machines. He had completely rebuilt them from the inside while making it look like routine maintenance. When the tentacled overseers created their computer network, the programming had basic errors that would have caused system crashes every few days. Amy Rodriguez hadn't just managed the network. She had created an entirely new layer of software that fixed alien programming mistakes in real-time. When the Rock people designed their military formations, the tactics were based on outdated strategies that would have failed against modern enemies. Tony Mitchell hadn't just coordinated battles, he had secretly redesigned their entire military doctrine while letting alien commanders think they were still following their own plans. Alex read report after report, each one revealing another way that humans had been holding the coalition together. The aliens hadn't just been using human services. They had been completely dependent on human problem-solving, abilities that they didn't even know existed. The Coalition Council called an emergency meeting in the one remaining functional government building. Representatives from all 47 species gathered to discuss their desperate situation. Without working communications, many had traveled for weeks just to attend this meeting. "We must contact the human colonies immediately," declared Elder Zexara of the Hive Mind Collective. "Our agricultural worlds are starving. Our military forces cannot defend against the insect swarm," admitted General Thraxon. "We need human tactical knowledge. Our reactor systems are approaching critical failure," reported Entity Prime Azeth. "Without human safety protocols, we face planetary destruction." Ambassador Chris Martinez stood up to address the council. He was exhausted from 6 months of trying to help solve problems that required entire teams of human experts. "I have been documenting the collapse," Chris said quietly. "I have sent detailed reports to every government, explaining what is happening and why. But I am just one person. The problems you are facing required thousands of humans working together to solve." The alien representatives looked at each other with growing desperation. They had always seen humans as useful workers, but now they were beginning to understand the truth. Humans hadn't just been part of the coalition. They had been the invisible foundation that kept everything working. "Can you contact the human colonies?" asked Senator Viktar of the Gas Cloud Collective. Chris shook his head. "Our long-range communication systems were also maintained by humans. They failed weeks ago. Even if we could send a message, we don't know where the human fleet went." As if responding to his words, a technician rushed into the meeting room. "We're receiving a signal from the edge of Coalition space," she announced. "It's from long range. Sensors monitoring the border regions." The message that appeared on the main screen was short and shocking. Long-range sensors had detected massive structures being built in the unexplored regions where the humans had gone. The construction was happening on a scale never seen before, using technologies that the sensors couldn't identify. The human colonies weren't just surviving in their new territory. They were thriving. They had built advanced cities, developed new technologies, and created defensive systems that made their space completely impenetrable to outside contact. Chris composed a simple message and sent it toward human space using the Coalition's few remaining transmitters. The message was desperate and direct. "We understand now. Please come home." Days passed, then weeks. The message was transmitted repeatedly, but no response came back. Finally, monitoring stations detected something that made the Coalition's situation even more hopeless. Human space had gone completely silent. Not because they were ignoring the Coalition's pleas for help, but because they had advanced so far beyond their former partners that the Coalition's problems were no longer even visible to them. The humans had moved on. They had built a new civilization that was so advanced, so sophisticated, that they no longer noticed the struggling aliens they had left behind. The Galaxy Coalition continued to collapse, one failed system at a time. The aliens finally understood that humans weren't just useful members of their civilization. Humans had been the reason their civilization existed at all. The day humans left, everything started falling apart. And now, 6 months later, it was clear that everything would continue falling apart until there was nothing left to fall.